Hello and welcome to the Cranogcast. Today we are sitting down with Becky and Sean as part of capturing what we're doing regarding the Pottery Project. Becky and Sean, if you just want to introduce yourself, Becky.
Hi, I'm Becky Underwood. I work at the Scottish Cranog Centre. I'm here as part of the Pottery Project, and I also do interpretation of our collection.
Hello, I'm Sean Kingsley. I work at the University of Dundee, and I also run my own pottery practice called Butterwine Pottery, and I've been invited to help out on this pottery project for the Cranog.
Wonderful, Sean. So you've come to the Cranog Centre today. If you'd just like to explain why you're here.
Okay, so we've been discussing two projects. One is to recreate some food utensils that can be used on an open fire, based on the collection here, and looking at some of the shards and trying to imagine how they were actually made, what shapes they were, what type of clay they used, and how they actually heated their food up without these pots cracking, because that's quite a challenge.
Yeah.
So Becky and I, who's also a potter, we've been talking through how that might be possible.
Okay. And how might that be possible?
Well, quite often with ceramics, you need to do some experimentation. So,
Yeah.
So a bit of research, and we're going to make some pots, try them out, see which ones blow up, and
Which is likely.
Yeah, and adjust the shapes. Well, we've been looking at two sites, haven't we? So
Yes.
You tell them more about that because that's.
So we have a little bit of pottery from the Oakbank Cranog on this loch, which is really chunky, probably part of a big bucket pot. And then we're also looking at.
Can I just say as well, it's chunky, and it's got lots of big stones in it. This
Big
clay,
stones,
they haven't cleaned up the clay very much at all.
Yeah.
So you reckon, from your experience, you would say that they've not added it in, it's what's left behind in the clay?
It could be either.
Could be either.
Yeah, but I can't, at the moment, I don't understand why you would add in such big stones. It's quite unusual. Yeah. And that's your experience
That's what
as
I've
well.
been saying since I come here.
Yeah.
It's just a bit strange to look at and understand how they fired it without it just blowing up completely. So that's the Oakbank stuff, and then we have a large collection from Dunvarvet, which is up on the Isle of Lewis, and it's completely different. Roughly the same age, but very thin vessels. Lots of different shapes. We've seen some nice flared rims, haven't we? Big.
So what do you mean by flared rims?
Flared rims is the very top of the pot. So the bit that kind of
Just moves out, it's just shaped out.
Just shapes
flares
out,
out.
flares
Nobody
out.
can see our hands.
No.
Yeah.
Bone out. Yeah, I get you.
Yeah.
Whereas the bucket pot that Becky's describing is just almost straight-sided.
Okay.
You know.
Okay, so it's not just the material you'd expect. Would you expect the material to be incredibly different in different areas?
Well, yeah, that's one of the things that we're wondering about is the clay source that they used here. So one of the chaps that works here called
Jason.
That's right. He's found a clay source. So
Yes,
that's an experiment we'd like to pursue, if possible, is to use some of Jason's clay and see if that's sort of similar to.
So we spoke to Jason in our previous podcast about his crucible reconstruction.
Yes, it's
And I
lovely.
think
Yeah,
there's a connectivity here between what he's doing and what you're doing. Obviously, it's all folded into the Pottery Project. But I know from what he found, which would be interesting to get your idea on, is that he found that his process in the clay, he couldn't extract the mica schist from the clay from where it was, because that's just what was in it. And we kind of always use this assumption that they're putting it in, but actually he was quite clearly saying they're just not taking it out.
Exactly, yeah. That'd be my.
Yeah. So that's interesting to see that you're talking about the Oakbank pottery having really, really big inclusions in it, because again, is it added in or is it just not taken out? So there's lots of work there. I'd be very interested in that. But then I'm sad. So there you go. So that's the Oakbank stuff, and the Dunvaravat stuff. In terms of its the biggest difference, what would you say is the biggest difference?
Pretty much everything except for
Yeah.
the way it's made.
Okay.
Both pots are coiled, and we can see the coils, which is basically when you add the sausages on top of each other and smooth them all out.
Yeah.
But everything else, the shape, the texture, I would say the firing's slightly different as well, maybe.
The thinness is
The
the
thinness is the main
biggest.
difference,
Yeah.
yeah. So
And then there's some decoration, isn't there?
there's a lot of decoration, yeah. The Oakbank stuff doesn't have any decoration, and
No.
the Dunvaravat stuff is just covered in it. Sometimes almost the complete outside of the pot's covered in decoration. So
It's great. So in a way, I suppose it's what you've kind of hit the nail on the head there is that we talk about Iron Age pottery, but actually we shouldn't tar Iron Age pottery as a whole. This is what Iron Age pottery is like. Local, your geography and your geology will dictate the pottery that you're making.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. And Dunvaravat's got seemingly a source of clay which allows for finer pottery, which they're able to put more decoration on. The potter themselves taking more time to do that, whereas Oakbank, it's maybe a bit rough and ready and all practicality driven. So how are you going to do that? How is that going to translate into what you're making? Do you know yet?
No, I think. No, I don't know. That's what the experiments
I love it.
will be about.
Brilliant.
So we have to get a clay that will work and that will survive thermal shock. But actually, in our chats, we're starting to think that in fact it wasn't. They weren't put on the fire at all.
Okay.
They were maybe using boil stones.
Okay.
Especially with the shape of it. Most cooking pots across the world will be round bottom.
Yeah. So by boil stones, how do you mean? What's the process there?
As far as I understand, it's just a stone that's been in the fire, which is hot.
Yep.
And then it's transferred into the pot
Okay.
with the water in it, and then whatever they're cooking. So that water would gradually get hot. You know, they'd probably allow that to heat up, then take the stone out, or just add another hot stone.
Keep cycling them around.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it'd be a much slower cooking process, I would imagine.
Yep.
But it wouldn't. It'd save the pot from thermal shock.
Yeah.
Which comes from direct heat on a small area of the pot.
Yeah.
And then the rest of the pot being much cooler. So you get that tension between the clay that expands very slightly where it's hot. And then when it's cooler, it hasn't expanded, so you're getting this tension between the two bits, which is what you would call thermal shock. And
that causes the crack, and then the crack of the pottery. So basically, if the pot's getting really hot because you're putting it on the fire, you're heating, you're cooking, but then as it's cooling, only the base of the pot is kind of, because it's only the base that's taking more heat, you're getting different changes in tensions, and then the pot is cracking because it's not cooling all at the same rate.
Yeah, exactly. It's not the extreme temperature itself, because obviously it can withstand a hot temperature. It's the unevenness of the temperature.
Okay. And by placing the pot, I would call, sorry, old archaeology term, I would call them a pot boiler, where you take a stone and you put it in, because it's got the water. If you're cooking with that, it's spreading the heat much more evenly through it.
Yeah, exactly. Apart from where it hits the bottom of the pot, right enough.
Yeah.
I mean, it's going to be a challenge. I suppose there's been the Iron Age, there might be iron implements for them to use.
Yeah.
But it's going to be a challenge picking up a hot stone, isn't it? And putting it in a pot without just dropping it in.
I mean, I've done a little bit with pot boilers. It was about 4 years ago.
Okay.
It was, we didn't do pot boilers themselves. But the amount of heat that can be transferred just through a hot rock is incredible. Because we did a pit cooking, and what we actually did is we took a small pit, really ramped up the fire, put a load of stones, thermal resistant stones. We didn't use friable. You have to get the right stones to do it. And then we just shoveled all those stones into a pit, put a wrap joint of meat on top, and then just covered it over. And after 2.5 hours, it had cooked the whole joint of meat just because of that transition of heat. So I think actually, if again, because it's something we don't use today, we've lost practice maybe, and we've lost the technique of how to do it. But with a bit of know-how and a bit of rhythm, you can very easily cook, hot water, anything, stew, whatever it might be.
It would explain why the bases of the pots are flat if you have it on a flat surface. And why they're so chunky as well, maybe to
hold, because you got the impact. That's it.
The chunkiness may come through the poor quality of the clay, though.
That too,
as well. Where it looks potentially like it's quite silty.
Yeah.
Not that much clay in it, or relatively, from a potter's point of view.
That's exactly what the stuff that Jason pulled out looked like.
So the lot bed clay, we call it the lot bed clay, but obviously it carries on onto the lock side if you dig down. But it's like when you take it out, it's very, very, not a potter's term here, but it's very short, so it just breaks, it's friable and stuff, but it's like very silty.
Sand,
And this does make me wonder about the making method. You're talking about making it with sausages of clay, but when it gets like that, it becomes more a case of just pressing it together, almost. And even if it was to go into a basket or something, it would be held up as it dries, and sort of almost scraped in, or a wooden mould, if that was possible. You'd probably see evidence of a basket, wouldn't you? Right enough.
That's why I had thought about that at one point. A wooden mould at the base or something that you could kind of prop it up.
Yeah.
But, I'm sorry.
No, that's good. It's good stuff. So, so you're going to experiment. You're going to play around. You'll have to come back and tell us what you've played around with.
All right.
And we'll get all that in. And I believe you're going to do some more work as well with the Cranog in terms of the groups that we're working with.
That's right.
Yep. So Becky, what's that plan there?
So we're currently working with quite a few groups in the Pottery Project. But the group that we're working with Sean is RASAC, which is the Rape and Sexual Abuse Centre in Perth, and Isles, which is a one-stop learning service for women who have served short-term prison sentences. But some of the women are, it kind of overlaps, and we've used both services. So they came along a few weeks ago, and they met us all for the first time. We had the site shut down for them, and they got to make some pots. They did wire jewellery, we ate together, we played games, and they're now part of our Cranog community. So they'll be coming back, hopefully, and we'll be working with Sean for that. So if you want to maybe talk about the plaque.
So, well, the idea was to make a plaque, and inspired by the collection again, but also make it as completely different from the collection as possible.
Yeah.
So the antithesis, not sure if that's the right word.
It's a good word.
The opposite.
Yeah.
Of this very low-fired local rough clay.
Yeah.
We're going to use a clay called Parian, which is very white, it's translucent, so you can put a light behind it, and you'll get a glow from it. And it's quite glass-like as well, and it's fired to a much higher temperature.
Yeah.
So it's just to create that contrast. And the plaque hopefully will be lit from behind, and we're planning on. I'm going to do some tests to make sure it works, because with ceramics, there's always potential for failure, even with testing. But the more you can test, the more you can kind of get things nailed down and workable. Especially if you're working with a group of people, you don't want to put a lot of effort into something that then fails, because everybody's disappointed.
Well, you've never been to the Cranog very much. That's what we do.
So
you learn a lot from failure. That's like.
Well, yeah. I like to do my failure in private. Well, not private, but I'll certainly share it So the idea would be to make some tiles. I think this is what we're talking about, getting some clay, getting these ladies to, we're not quite sure of the brief, but decorate the tiles in some way with low relief.
That should be led by them, shouldn't it?
Yeah,
It's up to what they want to represent. We were
exactly.
talking about whether they want to represent what they would have liked to do in the Iron Age or themselves now. Very much led by them.
Brilliant.
So we've got to sort of figure out what the brief might be. Might be more open than that. But anyway, we'll end up with some tiles.
Fantastic.
A low relief.
Yep.
And then I'm going to take some plaster molds of those tiles.
Yeah.
So that we end up with the negative of it.
Yeah.
And then we can pour the liquid Parian clay into the tile, into the plaster mold, and that then creates the positive of it.
Yeah.
And I've usefully done a demonstration with my hands there. We'll end up with a recreation of the tile that was decorated.
Fantastic.
But in Parian clay.
Yeah.
And by having the plaster mold, we can recreate this any number of times, and we can recreate the tiles in different clays as well.
Fantastic.
Potentially put them in the shop.
Yeah.
Don't know if we
Put
should
them on
say
display.
Put them
All
on
these
display,
things, whatever it may be.
And also the ladies obviously can take away these pieces as well. So.
Brilliant. Well, it sounds like a fantastic project.
So
sounds
yeah,
good to me.
I'm looking forward to getting into it. Yeah.
We'll have to do this again at a later date. Catch up on this project halfway through, and then maybe catch up again when we're all done and dusted and all our clay has worked and nobody has failed. So there you go. Wonderful. Thank you very much for your time, and we'll speak to you soon. Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
Hi guys, it's Chantel again instead of Richard this week, as he's still on his honeymoon. I'm sat here today with Fran and Jess from the Chronology Centre, and they have both been on the podcast before discussing the Pottery Project. So this is our third instalment on the Pottery Project in terms of podcasts. And we've got Fran here and Jess to give you an update, kind of the direction it's going in and the work they've done so far. So, Fran, if you want to tell me a little bit of an update compared to the last time, which I think was May, the last time they had an update about the Pottery Project.
Yeah, great. Yeah, it probably was, wasn't it? We've done absolutely loads since May. Chantal, it's been a fantastic summer for us. We've really been able to reach out to the target groups that we've been working with. We've done outreach for them, which has involved us taking the pottery out to these organisations, to their offices, and doing some fantastic immersive experiences and educational hands-on stuff, loads of fun crafts and things. But we've also been doing events for them here at the centre. And just to remind everybody, the target groups that we're working with are some support organisations in Perth, but we've now expanded that since our last podcast to include Dundee as well. And these support organisations just give a bit of a helping hand and advice and care to people who are survivors of all manner of domestic violence and sexual abuse and rape and so forth. So they really have been a wonderful group of people to work with, and it's been fantastic that we've been able to do so many really lovely activities for them. So that's been the bulk of the stuff that we've done for them over the summer.
Fabulous. And can you tell us a little bit about how the engagement has been going? You've got, since the last time you listened, the pottery pieces hadn't actually been in the back of the museum on the tours, but now they are. So you tell me a little bit about how that's helping you out, how you feel like that's progressing with the museum.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, you're absolutely right. The Pottery Project is based at the back of the museum, so any visitors coming to see us will see that we've got some lovely pieces laid out for you to help us clean as you walk through the museum. But we've been taking bags of the pot sherds, and this is all 2,500 years old, this material. It's really, really gorgeous stuff. We've been taking it out to these groups or setting it up for them if they've been visiting us for a fully inclusive day. They've been helping us clean the stuff. They've been choosing items for display, but they've also been, as I said, receiving a whole load of other activities. What this has been helping us do is gradually, more importantly for us, it's been helping us work through the cleaning of the pottery so that it's all lovely and clean and ready for us to put on display. It's helping us to sort it and catalogue the whole stuff as we go through with all of that. And when we've been doing events for them here on site, we've been able to spread out of an evening in the entire museum and really sort of help people get to grips. We had a wonderful evening last week where we must have got through about 3 or 4 bags of pottery, so that was absolutely fantastic, with some lovely people who came and helped us with that from the Breadalbane Heritage Society. So whether we're doing this work in-house at the museum or whether we're doing it, taking it out to people, doesn't matter. They still get a fantastic day with us. And it's very much about learning who they are, who these groups are, who our new partners are for this project. It's all very much about sharing our knowledge with them sharing their experiences with us, and everybody comes together in this lovely collaboration, really, in order to get the project dealt with, but actually it's about us reaching out to everybody. So although we've done some wonderful stuff learning about our pottery, finding out all these gorgeous pieces, discovering some pieces as we've cleaned them, what's been really lovely ultimately is about making friends, discovering all these lovely new partners to work with, making friends, and hopefully getting them engaged with all our work in the future. And I think that's a really crucial thing that this project's done for us.
Absolutely. So what have your favourite kind of moments been so far in kind of that journey of making the connections and making bonds with people, as opposed to just just cleaning pieces of pottery? Like, how is it building the relationship?
I know what you mean. I think for me the journey has been very much that bridging that gap. You know, we've been able to build such a rapport with people. And I think one thing that stands out for me in particular was when we greeted a coach party of people who came to visit us for one of these events, and they were incredibly shy because of their experiences, and they've had horrific experiences, but they absolutely recoiled from us when we first met them in the car park. We walked them over to the centre. At the end of the day, they were giving us hugs and saying, "Thank you, what a fantastic day." They were coming out of their shells, they were talking to us. And I remember sitting at the table making a pottery tray, a little pottery dish, with another group, with some people around the table. And one of these ladies in the group was just chatting away to me, and it was the first time that she actually began to speak, and she was making the most gorgeous little decorative piece. It's just about making those lovely connections. It's very difficult to put that experience into words, really, but
Yeah.
It's been a really rewarding journey. I think the first time I was on this podcast was with Tika, and we'd just done the pottery conservation workshop.
Yep.
And since then I've been doing the out and the in reach, and it's good fun as well when we have these groups come to us. It changes the feel of the site. We're able to, like you said, it's social. We're being with these people, we're engaging with them. It's not all about just history and pottery, it's just about people connecting over something that is interesting as well. We're sharing that interest. You mentioned Dundee as well. So I was on the group that went to Dundee with the pottery in the back of the car, and that was a bit, my heart was pounding the entire time knowing that I've got this 2,500-year-old pottery just in the boot of the car the whole time. But it was really good fun, and that particular session was with a group of kids with additional support needs, and we just had a really nice time. And I hope we were able to provide them with a really positive experience as well.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what makes this kind of thing so rewarding, really. It helps us from a curatorial point of view, but ultimately it's about sharing our collections with people. You know, they're not for us to keep in a box and, you know, not let people look at. They are there. They were left behind, you know, by the Crannog people for us to share with the communities of today. And as Jess says, it's just been incredibly rewarding.
Absolutely. So any of these groups do you have like an ongoing relationship with across the course of the Pottery Project? Is there any groups that you kind of having repeat outreach with? Yeah.
So we've been doing a lot with Bernardo's, the charity organisation, as I think Fran mentioned. Also the Breadalbane Heritage Society that we had over for an evening of crock washing. That was really lovely. With coffee, with cake, and the evening just went so quickly, and we're hoping to have them back with us sort of throughout November we'll have days, we'll have some tea and cake, and we'll just spend a day in the museum just cleaning pottery, learning about it together, sharing that experience. It was just a really lovely social evening that happened to be really productive as well.
Yeah. So we have had some new people join the team for the Pottery Project as of recent. So Jess would be taking on a role in the Pottery Project. So Jess, if you want to first of all give a refresh of the basic Pottery Project aims and intentions for maybe potential new listeners, and a little bit about why you've joined and what kind of direction you'll be taking yourself down the Pottery Project.
So I wasn't actually expecting to be a part of the Pottery Project, especially when I was first on this podcast. It was a complete coincidence that I was on a pottery-based episode. But since then, I am part of the Pottery Project now. I've been at outreach, inreach. I've been just cleaning the pottery. We have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these beautiful pieces of pottery, broken sherds, all from, I think it's all from Lewis, from the Isle of Lewis, from an Iron Age crannog over there. And all of these pieces need to be cleaned, and they all need to be analysed, and it all needs to be documented. And I'm just going to be doing a big part of that. But as we've been saying, it's not just someone sitting in a cold little office room doing it by themselves. We're making it this really fun, exciting community project. So I've been doing a lot of that, and as winter comes along, as our site closes to the public a little bit more, I'll also have more time to just sit and do some solid data entry, which will be quite nice as well, just to sit and focus completely on that, as well as doing a little bit more outreach there.
Fabulous. So in terms of the data, what kind of information can you kind of gauge that we're getting already? Like what kind of pieces are you finding? What kind of stories are they telling so far?
Yeah, with the kind of information that you want to get, you can do a very basic physical description of the piece. We need to weigh the pieces, we need to measure them. But because, as Jess said, we've got so many pieces, and literally we have about 40 boxes of wonderful sherds, we're going to be highlighting or cherry picking the pieces that can tell us something about the pottery. So what we're looking for are pieces that are diagnostic. That would be either rim pieces, base pieces, or decorative bits. Those are the bits that can tell us a really good, true story. Those are the ones which will be individually weighed and measured and described. And then the other pieces will be kept in their context. That's the part of the site on which they were found. They will be kept collectively together and in small quantities, just collectively sort of identified and so on. You could describe this as the biggest jigsaw puzzle in the world, because we hope that by the time we've finished this process, or rather by the time Jess has finished this process, with others hopefully helping her along the way, and that's where the volunteers can come in. You know, it'll be nice for them to realise that they're not just cleaning a piece and then it goes back in a bag, that there is this kind of process and a series of sort of activities and events and things that happen to a piece of pottery. But once we've got those together, we're hoping actually that we'll have enough information and description, and also just visually looking at the pieces. With any luck, we'll actually be able to reassemble a pot. And that would be fantastic if we could do that.
The ultimate
Even
goal,
if there's one or two little gaps or a piece missing, if we could actually reassemble a pot 3/4 or more, that would be, I think, absolutely
amazing.
Yeah, that would be wonderful to do.
Have you found any pieces so far that you think may have been part of the same part?
Interestingly, yes, we have. And what makes our life difficult, if you like, or the job, you could say makes it more interesting, is that they're not necessarily found in the same area. So we have to imagine back on the crannog site that somebody dropped a pot, and in frustration they picked it up and they might have flung the pieces in different directions. So one piece of the pot may end up on one side of the site, and another piece of it may end up in the other side. Another thing that can happen is that children could have picked up some pieces because they found them pretty to look at. They could have taken them off to a corner of the house and then dropped them there. So that's how another, important piece of a pot may end up apart from, totally away from the rest of its neighbours or the bits that it belongs with. And another thing that can happen is that people can pick up a broken pot and think that that's going to be useful to use as rubble infill for a wall. So sometimes we're finding whole clusters of these pieces of pots all in one area, but then a few other vital parts from one pot may be in a completely different area. So the context, the area of the site on which they're found is useful, but we do have to kind of make sure that we're looking at all those different pieces. So we have to kind of be aware of remembering that we saw a really nice thin orange piece, and I remember seeing a really nice thin orange piece, in a bag from a completely different context 2 weeks ago. And we've got to really, at some point, we'll be spreading things out and really having a good visual just look and feeling, and just sort of using all of our senses really.
Because so much is by feel as
totally.
well. Especially when you're looking for fingerprints, we often find fingerprints on the outside, but also the inside. A lot of times it's on the inside of the pottery.
Yeah.
And you might not visually clock onto that immediately, but when you run your finger over it, it becomes really obvious, and that sort of stuff is really important and just very, very human. It really connects you.
It does,
to the people throughout the past.
Yeah, absolutely, it does. Yeah, so it's really humbling. It's a gorgeous project, but it's really humbling at the same time when you realise you've got that connection to them. Yeah,
that every piece of this pottery was held by someone.
Yeah,
well. I find that very, very
very touching. Quite magical.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah. Getting to actually touch parts of history of past people's lives. I agree.
Yeah.
So with the pieces you've found so far, can you kind of make a guess or some sort of understanding of what this pottery might have been used for? Like, is there any particular cooking pieces you've been able to determine? Any vase, decorative pottery, just bowls to hold things in? Have you kind of been able to make those kind of guesses so far with the pieces you've got so at the moment?
Well, we found a few pieces that we think probably have burnt food on the inside, which is really exciting because we can send those off for analysis, hopefully, fingers crossed, and someone will be able to tell us exactly what they've been cooking on it. But we also found really small pieces as well. Some rims are incredibly tiny, which I don't think
they are, aren't they?
From...
Very fine and thin. Yeah.
It's not going to be a pot for storing apples or something in.
No. But you're absolutely right, Chantal. I suppose we're looking for things. If there's any kind of soot or sooting on a piece, that might tell us that it was used near the fire.
Yeah.
So they might have been wanting to dry something out inside it, or just roast off hazelnuts or something like that. It doesn't have to be necessarily a liquid food that's in there. Or they might have had some milk in a pot and just left it beside the fire to warm it up because they wanted to have that cream rising to the top, as part of the whole dairying process. So the scorching, the sooting is nice to find. But not until we've, I think, reassembled or hopefully assembled a couple of pots will we be able to get an idea of what their overall shape was like, and then that will tell us whether that was used for storage or for transportation or something like that. So at the moment the pieces aren't telling us a great deal, apart from potentially, as I say, being near a fire. Hopefully we'll get much more of a sort of full answer to that when we've glued a few bits together, or at least, given them to Tickler, our wonderful conservator, to glue together.
And that's where the diagnostic pieces really come in, the rims and the bases, because those are the ones that are going to tell you about the shape of the pot, the style, the size, hopefully as well. So we can get a better idea of just an outline, really.
Yeah, absolutely.
Of the type of styles that we're dealing with here.
Yeah.
So roughly, how far through these boxes of pottery? They've got absolutely heaps of boxes of pottery. If you've ever been on one of the tours at the back of the museum, roughly how far would you say you're through now? So we're about, how many months are we into the project now, Fran?
We started the project in March, April, although we didn't really get started until the middle of summer, really, in terms of sort of having a good look. It's difficult to tell because we're cleaning things from a mixture of different contexts at the moment. That's how we started out, and we're only now kind of stopping doing a scattergun approach and actually methodically working through box by box. So, for example, I put some pieces away today from last week's crock wash, and found that half the box had already been, or half of that context number had already been previously cleaned, and there were just 1 or 2 bits left in there.
That's a pleasant surprise.
Yeah, absolutely. But I would still hazard a guess that we're only about 5-10% through cleaning everything, I think. Still a long way to go.
Well, if anyone's got any helping hands, you book down at the museum and help us wash some pottery. Because when I say we've got a lot, I mean we have got a lot. If you've ever followed it on the Instagram or the Facebook, you see what we've got going on. So far, both of you, what have been some of your favourite pieces that people have found on this crop wash?
Fingerprints are definitely always, there's
Yeah.
always something really, really magical about that. Lots of people are really drawn to like certain pieces. They'll sort of spend a lot of time cleaning that piece and looking and asking questions about that particular piece. My personal favourite so far has been this absolutely tiny little rim piece. It's not much bigger than a fingernail. I want to say it's a straight rim, but it's so delicate and so thin, and it's just such a joy to look at. It just makes me very happy. It's just very cute. It's very delicate, and to think of someone making the effort of making that and making it so neat and so tiny, and then wondering what's been in it as well. It's just it really captured my imagination.
Yeah.
That one.
Yeah, that was lovely, wasn't it? I'd have to agree with Jess. I think for me, it's the pieces which have been either decorated with fingernails or fingerprints, or as Jess says, on the inside base of them, where they've sort of depressed periodically over the base of a pot. To thin out the clay in certain areas to speed up the cooking process, just to convex that heat through.
yeah.
Very clever, isn't it? But the other thing that I've really loved is where we've found pieces, again using fingers, but where we've had coils, because often these pots are just a simple coil pot. That was the most frequent way of making pots at this time period. And sometimes you can see on the inside of a piece where two coils together have just been smeared with the finger, either just to sort of glue them together, just to sort of force them just to meld with each other a little bit, or perhaps where they've collapsed slightly and you can tell that the person has held the pot, the wet clay in their hands, and just sort of pressed them back together again. And when you see their fingerprints caught by accident like that, I think that's really
lovely.
something, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because the deliberate fingerprints are absolutely gorgeous, but this is a person just accidentally, or without thinking about it, scraping their, wiping their finger across a piece of wet clay, and that
Just
whole
a
smear has
moment
been trapped.
captured in time, isn't
Totally
it?
it
It's
is.
just a single
Yeah.
instant.
Yeah,
Subconsciously as well, like unconsciously done.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Some of the favourite pieces I've found, so I'll go and have a little clean if I'm ever in the back or just taking some content in the museum. And the pieces that I found the most interesting, surprisingly, are the ones with the burnt food on. I remember the first time I found a piece, I was with you, Fran, at one of our events, and I put those goggles on that magnified it, and I was just having a look, and I was like, the inside of this one almost looks like the inside of a volcano, like it's really black, it's all really burnt. And then Fran was like, oh yeah, that's burnt food, and I was like it was really like, wow, it's just the first time I've found a piece that's got some sort of like more information to it other than a broken piece of pottery. And I was like, that's burnt food from 2,500 years ago. It's in my hands.
It's because you've got that direct human interaction with the pottery
Yeah.
from all that time ago. Someone had to have done that, and now
Yeah.
you're holding it.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of what we do is our sort of motto is thousands of fingerprints. So that's from the past, but also now. The more people we get involved, the better, because then they have that connection
Yeah.
to the pottery as well, sort of as an ongoing
Yeah.
thing as well.
Yeah, definitely. It's about sharing the whole experience with everybody else, definitely.
Yeah, it really is like, because I don't come from a history background. I've mentioned before I'm the marketing officer, just covering for Richards. I don't come from a history background, so this is the first time I'm getting to experience a lot of like the inside works of a museum, and it really is just quite like magic. I said it before, it's magic. But being able to come down, just get hands on with the past, is something I would absolutely recommend to anyone.
So if anyone's tired
yeah.
of cleaning their own dishes at home,
Just come and clean ours.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. We'll be letting you, Chantal, know when our volunteer cleaning days are over the winter, so they can be posted up on social media, and anybody who wants to join in,
Yes,
it'll be a lovely social day, as Jess said, coffee and cake and a few tables set up and a good chat and just cleaning.
It's quite therapeutic, isn't it?
It really,
it really is.
Yeah.
I forget how just involved I get in it. Like when we did the crock wash in the evening, I think it was supposed to be 2 hours, and Fran came and said, "Oh, we've reached a natural break with our bags." And I thought, oh, time for another cup of coffee. She's like, no, we're all going home now. 2 hours have just passed.
It was just,
It was incredible. And just being in the museum, in the quiet with other people, surrounded by all the other artefacts as well.
Yeah.
I think it's a really nice experience as well. It's quite immersive, it's great.
Absolutely. And in terms of the plans for the rest of the year up until our season closes here on this current site, what are the plans? I know you mentioned we've got the volunteer days, But is there anything else that you're planning on in the works for now?
We've got a couple more in-reach days to do for the organisations that we're working with. They're going to be coming to us in November and December. And then we'll be really, I think, cracking on with the cataloguing of these pieces and a bit of sort of collections management with our volunteer days once a week as well. And we also need to be selecting some pieces to send off for analysis, because we are going to do some we're going to do some dating and also get those lipid analyses done, as Jess says, to see, you know, if we can get any kind of clue as to the food that they were cooking or warming up, or, you know, any sort of process that they were using the pots for. So we've got to identify some of those pieces and get those sent off. And then in the new year, we'll begin to be thinking about what the displays might look like. We've already got some of the interpretation done, but we need to be thinking collectively about moving the whole museum anyway over to Delherbe, and part of that process will involve what the new pottery display looks like. So there'll be quite a lot of it's going to be a very busy winter.
Lots of packing, unpacking,
definitely,
cleaning.
yeah,
Absolutely. Well, thank you for that, guys. Like I said, and we all mentioned, if you do feel like coming down, keep an eye out on our social media pages and our website, and when we'll have the specific volunteer days. Or if you are fairly local, come down to the Crannog Centre and you can have a go, as long as you want, in the back of the museum. Helping us clean our pieces of pottery.
Yes, please.
You know, any help, any hands needed.
yeah, absolutely.
We've also got our Samhain event on the 31st of October, which is the last evening event of the year, and the second to last event of the year. So if you're looking for something to do, you've got no Halloween plans, I would definitely recommend coming down. We're going to have a ram burn. We're going to have aerial fire performances. It's going to be really spooky, but, you know, it's going to also be really fun. We won't scare you too much. But other than that, thank you for listening, guys. Hi everyone, I'm Chantel and I'm back again with Amy and Jess, and we are with a very special guest today. If you would like to introduce yourself, please.
Hello, my name's Gretel Evans, and I'm a conservator from AOC Archaeology.
And why are you down at the Crannog Centre today?
Well, I've come down here to look at the some of the wonderful collection on display, particularly the foundation posts from the Crannog, which were excavated sometime in the 1980s, and we're looking to move them and conserve them. So currently they are sitting in water, as they have been. The water's preserved them for the last 2,500 years or more, and we want to move them. So it's going to be easiest if we can take them out of the water, and if we're going to do that, then we feel that it would be best to preserve them by treating them with impregnating them with polyethylene glycol, and then carrying out a process called freeze drying, which will stabilize them, it dries them, and it supports them, so then they don't need to be in water anymore, and it will be easy to display them, people can see them, and the wonderful tool markings on them.
Fabulous.
The other thing that we've done today is was looking at the collection with the idea of doing what's called a conservation assessment. So the collection's in good shape, but obviously all archaeological objects are very fragile, and over time they do decay. These have had conservation processes carried out on them sometime after excavation, so that'll probably be in the 80s or the 90s. And as with everything, it's only slowing down the process of deterioration. So we're going to take another look at their condition and see if there's anything we can do for them in terms of making them a little bit more stable. So what we'll be doing is coming back, looking at every object, and then I will go away and write an assessment which would detail the condition of the objects and suggest treatments where we think we can improve the condition and stability.
Fabulous, thank you. And Jess and Amy, what are your thoughts on the process so far? How have you found today? How have you found working with Greta?
Oh, it's been lovely. It's been really nice. There are going to be some challenges when it comes to moving. Everyone's nodding right now. There are going to be some quite sizable challenges. Just the sheer size and weight of the uprights is going to be an issue. The fact that they're in water, we have to somehow drain that water without flooding the entire centre, preferably, I think. So it's logistics like that as well. How are we physically going to lift this stuff? How are we physically going to move it? How are we going to collect the water that's spilling? All these little things that we wouldn't have solutions, or we need Gretel to help us and guide us with her expertise.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting project. I think the word challenge is definitely the right approach. Obviously, somebody put them into water and they need to come out of water, so it is possible, but it could be a bit of a paddling pool on the day. The main concern I have is just looking after the wood objects, because they are so soft, and so they could be easily marked if they're not handled appropriately. So that's what we have to be careful on the day, just making sure that we handle them and they don't come to any harm or any damage, which I'm sure they won't. But it's going to be an interesting couple of days.
Yeah, I'm just excited to get them out of the water tanks. Because I mean, they look great in there now, but it'll be really nice to have them out in stables so we can look at them closer up. Like you said, there's really nice tool marks on there, which have been studied previously, but it'd be nice to look at them close up.
Yeah, I think they look fantastic.
Yeah.
When they're done, so it'd be really good, really positive step.
And what are the plans, kind of, in terms of how they will be displayed in the new museum? Obviously, you won't have anything set in stone, but are you going to put them back in a similar in the water tubes, or are you going to display them in a different way? Like, how are you planning on going about that?
Well, I think Andy, the museum designer, has got some good ideas, and I think he's really excited about the fact that they will now be dry and stable after their conservation, which gives him a lot more options for display, and I think he's talking about having them arranged so that they would almost replicate how they would have been in the Crannog. We've also discussed doing three-dimensional digital recording of them, and if you do that, then you would be able to have like a digital render which you can literally manipulate in 3 dimensions. So that would be really exciting for some kind of graphic display as well that they could produce.
Fabulous! That sounds very exciting.
It's just another way of preserving that information that they hold as well. I think it's really valuable if, God forbid, something does happen. There is damage, then we have that
record.
Image.
It's wonderful. I mean, it's a totally accurate replication of the object, the size, the dimensions, and the tool marks should be captured wonderfully as well, so people can do even more analysis with that digital data as well.
Fabulous. And in terms of the next steps of this little project, what are you kind of looking forward to? Obviously, finding out. Amy mentions the looking at the possible tool marks, but is there anything else that either you or Jess are interested in the next process?
Well, I'm interested in just coming back for another visit, because it's an absolutely gorgeous environment. I'm very jealous of everybody who works here on a daily basis, and I'm feeling like it's a wonderful Friday out the office for me. So I'm looking forward to coming back, approaching the challenge of getting them out, and doing a good job on that. And then obviously we will wrap them up and transport them very carefully to our premises over at AOC, where we can start the conservation process. So I'm looking forward to coming back and getting the job done, but enjoying the time on site as well.
Fabulous. What about you, Jess?
Yeah, I'm excited. I'm just excited for the logistics to see how it all works, because we will work it out. But it's getting to that step. It's the troubleshooting. It's the throwing ideas out. I think is going to be. We're going to get quite creative with it, quite out of the box. A children's paddling pool was mentioned.
Bring your cosy.
Everyone's going to be on waterproofs that day. No, I'm really excited to be a part of that process as well. I think it's going to be a real privilege to participate in.
Yeah.
Fabulous. Well, make sure to take lots of pictures of when it does actually happen, so people can actually see the mess that it is potentially almost definitely going to make.
Yeah.
But that's everything. Is there anything else you'd like to add at all?
No, just I've had a lovely day out, looking at the objects and meeting the team.
To working with Gretel further as well.
Yeah, it's been lovely.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much, guys.